The first thing Cashinvale registered was pain. A deep, throbbing ache that seemed to resonate through every bone in his body, each muscle protesting as consciousness crept back into his mind. The second thing he noticed was that the bed beneath him appeared to be breathing. His eyes snapped open, immediately regretting the decision as harsh blue-tinted light assaulted his retinas. The ceiling above him pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent glow, not the sterile white panels of the military med bay he'd expected. A strange smell wafted through the air, something like antiseptic mixed with burnt caramel, both clinical and oddly sweet. "Where the hell?" he croaked, his voice coming out as little more than a raspy whisper. When he tried to sit up, his body screamed in rebellion, sending jolts of electric agony down his spine. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a melodic voice from his left. "You're not done breaking yet." Cashin's head turned, too quickly, making the room spin toward the source of the voice. His vision cleared enough to make out a slender figure seated beside his bed. Not human. Definitely not human. She, at least he thought it was a she, had skinned the pale blue of a winter sky, with iridescent patches along her high cheekbones that caught the light when she moved. Her ears extended into elegant points, adorned with what looked like living jewelry that occasionally changed color. But most striking were her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and filled with swirling gold flecks against violet irises. "Am I dead?" Cashin managed, attempting what he thought was a witty quip, but what emerged sounded more like a dying frog's final croak. The alien woman's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Not for lack of trying," she replied, reaching for something on a nearby table. "Your species has a remarkable talent for nearly getting yourselves killed." She held up a vial containing an opalescent liquid that shifted between blue and silver as it caught the light. "Drink this. It will help with the pain." Cashin eyed the shimmering substance suspiciously. "No offense, but I make it a point not to accept drinks from strangers. Especially not alien strangers when I have no idea where I am." "Suit yourself," she shrugged, setting the vial down. "But that stubborn pride won't make your 3 fractured ribs, punctured lung, or the nanite-sealed lacerations across your back hurt any less." Another wave of pain crashed through him, and Cashin reconsidered his position on mysterious alien concoctions. With a grimace, he nodded toward the vial. "That's what I thought," the alien woman said, helping him lift his head just enough to sip the liquid. It tasted nothing like he expected, not medicinal at all, but reminiscent of honeysuckle and thunderstorms, if such a combination could exist. Almost immediately, a cooling sensation spread through his chest, dulling the sharp edges of his pain. "I'm Sarah," the alien woman offered, setting the empty vial aside. "That's not my actual name, but it's close enough for your human vocal apparatus to pronounce without embarrassing us both." Cashinvale, he replied, feeling his eyelids grow heavy again. "Where am I? What happened?" His gaze drifted around the room, noticing for the first time that the walls seemed to be alive. They pulsed with faint blue veins, occasionally rippling as though responding to unseen stimuli. The ceiling above him trembled slightly, sending down whispers that reminded him of rustling leaves. "You're aboard the Avalor bioship Luminera," Sarah explained, adjusting something that looked unsettlingly like a living seashell attached to the side of his bed. It hummed softly, emitting a gentle glow that scanned across his torso. "As for what happened, we were rather hoping you might fill in some of those blanks." Cashin tried to focus, to remember. Flashes came back to him. The thunderous explosion, the screams of his squad mates, blinding light, then nothing. "Am I a prisoner?" he asked, suddenly tensing despite the pain it caused. Sarah regarded him with what might have been amusement. "Not a prisoner, simply a patient. Though I admit, having a human soldier aboard an Avalor medical vessel is unusual. So, you're not going to dissect me or probe my brain?" Cashin attempted another joke, his voice slurring slightly as whatever was in that drink began to pull him back toward sleep. "Not today," Sarah replied with what might have been a wink. "Get some rest, Cashinvale. You're going to need it." As consciousness slipped away, Cashin's last image was of Sarah still sitting by his bedside, her slender fingers adjusting holographic displays that seemed to float in the air above his body. The last coherent thought that passed through his mind was a jumbled mix of confusion and a strange, inexplicable trust in this alien woman who had apparently saved his life. Where is he? What had happened to his squad? And why would an alien, race he'd been taught to fear rescue, an enemy soldier? The questions swirled in his mind as he drifted back into darkness. When Cashin next awoke, the pain had subsided to a dull ache rather than the sharp, stabbing agony from before. He experimentally wiggled his toes, then his fingers, relieved to find everything still attached and functioning. His muscles felt stiff but surprisingly strong given what he'd been through, whatever that was. "Look who's rejoined the living," came Sarah's now familiar voice. She appeared at his bedside, holding a cup filled with a silvery liquid. "How do you feel?" "Like I got stepped on by a mech suit," Cashin groaned, managing to push himself up slightly on his elbows this time. "But better than yesterday." "Or, how long have I been out?" "3 cycles," Sarah replied, which meant absolutely nothing to Cashin. Seeing his confusion, she added, "About 72 of your Earth hours, give or take." Cashin's eyes widened. 3 days? "My unit is likely not looking for you," Sarah finished gently. "You were the only survivor we found in that sector." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. Jenkins, Rodriguez, Miyazaki, all gone. He'd served with some of them for years. The thought made his chest constrict painfully. Sarah seemed to sense his distress. She placed the cup of silver liquid on a small, undulating table beside the bed. The table itself appeared to be a living organism, shifting slightly to securely hold the cup. "I'm sorry," she said, and sounded like she meant it. "War is regrettable, regardless of which side you're on." Cashin swallowed hard, pushing down the grief. There would be time for that later. Right now, he needed information. "What is this place? I mean, I get that it's a medical ship, but—" He gestured vaguely at the living walls, the pulsing ceiling, the organic technology that surrounded him. "The Luminera is a Type 4 healer vessel," Sarah explained, perching on what appeared to be a seat that had grown straight out of the floor. "Our ships are cultivated, not built. They're symbiotic organisms that we live within and care for, while they provide us transportation, shelter, and in this case, enhanced medical capabilities." "Your ship is alive?" Cashin couldn't keep the amazement from his voice. "Of course," Sarah replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Aren't yours?" Before Cashin could answer, his stomach let out an audible growl. He realized he hadn't eaten in days. "Ah, your digestive system is awake now, too." Sarah reached for the silver cup. "This will help. It contains nutrients calibrated for human physiology." Cashin eyed the silver liquid dubiously. "Not to sound ungrateful, but do you have any coffee?" Sarah's expression shifted to one of amused disgust. "That black toxin humans consume to fuel bad decisions? No, we don't keep poison on our medical vessels." "It's not poison," Cashin protested, reluctantly accepting the silver cup. "It's civilization in liquid form." "Your civilization must be quite bitter then," Sarah remarked dryly. Cashin couldn't help but smile at that as he cautiously sipped the silver liquid. It tasted neutral, slightly sweet, with a hint of something citrusy. Not unpleasant, but definitely not coffee. "So," he said after draining half the cup, "you've been playing nursemaid to the enemy for 3 days straight? Don't you have other patients to terrify with your bedside manner?" Sarah's expression remained impassive, but Cashin thought he detected a hint of amusement in those strange violet eyes. "You're my only patient at present, and you're not technically an enemy. I'm a human soldier. Your people and mine have been shooting at each other for the better part of a decade," Cashin pointed out. "The Avalor are healers, not warriors," Sarah corrected. "We assist the Veil in medical matters, but we don't participate in direct conflict." "The Veil," Cashin frowned. "You mean those tall guys in the living armor with the mood ring faces?" Sarah blinked in surprise. "That's actually not inaccurate, though I doubt they'd appreciate the comparison." She stood, smoothing down her flowing tunic. "Can you stand?" It would be good for your recovery to move around a bit. Cashin nodded, setting aside the now empty cup. With Sarah's assistance, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, which gave a small shudder as if protesting the loss of its patient, and carefully got to his feet. He immediately noticed he was wearing some kind of loose-fitting garment made from a material that felt like silk but seemed to adjust its temperature to perfectly match his body's needs. He also realized he was barefoot. "What happened to my boots?" he asked, feeling oddly vulnerable without them. Sarah tilted her head. "Why would you need foot coverings inside a clean environment?" "It's a human thing," Cashin muttered. "We like having our feet protected." "Protected from what?" "The floor." Sarah laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "The Luminera would never harm you. She adjusts her surfaces to optimal comfort for all inhabitants." As if to prove her point, the floor beneath Cashin's feet warmed slightly, molding subtly to support his arches perfectly. "Okay, that's actually pretty nice," he admitted, taking a tentative step forward. His legs felt weak, but held his weight. Sarah remained close, ready to catch him if needed. They moved slowly out of the recovery room and into a curved corridor that seemed to be made of the same living material as the rest of the ship. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along the walls, creating a gentle lighting that didn't strain Cashin's eyes. The air smelled fresh, with hints of something like cinnamon and sea salt. As they walked, small maintenance drones that resembled mechanical insects scuttled along the ceiling, occasionally pausing to communicate with what appeared to be vines growing from the walls. One drone got tangled in a particularly enthusiastic vine and emitted a series of indignant chirps before freeing itself. "Did that thing just argue with a plant?" Cashin asked incredulously. "Maintenance symbiotes and the ship's neural vines have ongoing jurisdictional disputes," Sarah explained with a straight face. "The vines believe they can self-repair, while the symbiotes are programmed to assist. It's been an ongoing philosophical debate for about 300 years. Cashin wasn't entirely sure if she was joking. As they rounded a corner, they encountered two other Avalor. Both were similar to Sarah in build and coloration, though one had elaborate markings along their arms that seemed to shift and change as Cashin watched. Both Avalor stopped when they saw him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness. They exchanged words in their native language, a series of musical tones and clicks that Cashin couldn't begin to understand, before continuing on their way, casting glances back at him as they departed. "What do they say?" Cashin asked. "They were surprised to see you up and about," Sarah replied diplomatically, though Cashin suspected there was more to it than that. They continued their walk, passing through what appeared to be communal spaces with organic furniture that grew from the walls and floors. Everything served multiple purposes, Cashin noticed. A table might also purify the air. A chair could apparently synthesize nutrients from light. As they approached what looked like an observation deck, a large, open space with a transparent section of the outer hull providing a view of space, Cashin overheard voices speaking in hushed tones. He slowed, straining to hear. Could be the key. The resonance patterns are unmistakable. The voice belonged to another Avalor, whom Cashin couldn't see from his position. "It's dangerous," came a second voice, deeper and with a strange harmonic quality that suggested it wasn't Avalor. "Using a human for this purpose. The Ancient Ones would not approve." "We don't have a choice," the first voice insisted. "The first spark is awakening. If we don't contain it soon." The voices fell silent as Sarah and Cashin approached. When they entered the observation deck, Cashin saw an Avalor male with elaborately patterned skin conferring with a tall, imposing figure clad in armor that seemed to ripple and shift like liquid metal. The armored figure wore a mask that changed colors subtly as they turned to regard the newcomers. One of the Veil, Cashin realized. Up close, they were even more intimidating than he remembered from battlefield glimpses. "Patient Veil," the Avalor acknowledged with a slight bow. "It is good to see you recovering." The Veil said nothing, but their mask briefly flashed a deep crimson before settling back to a neutral blue-green. "Commander Lyran, Sentinel Tarek," Sarah greeted them. "I'm helping our patient rebuild his strength." The Veil, Sentinel Tarek, apparently, tilted their head slightly. "The human appears functional." When can we proceed with the testing? Something in Sarah's demeanor changed. He's still recovering. Any testing will need to wait until I clear him medically. Testing? Cashin felt a flicker of unease. He'd been in enough military operations to know when he was being assessed for some purpose beyond simple medical care. Of course, Commander Lyron agreed smoothly. We wouldn't want to endanger such a valuable patient. The slight pause before patient didn't escape Cashin's notice. As they left the observation deck, Cashin waited until they were out of earshot before grabbing Sarah's arm gently. What testing? And what's this first spark they mentioned? Sarah's expression revealed nothing. You should rest more before we discuss such matters. No, Cashin insisted, surprised by his own vehemence. I need to know why I'm really here. Why save one human soldier when you could? Have left me for dead? What do you want from me? Sarah was silent for a long moment, then sighed. It's complicated, Cashin. Uncomplicated for me, he pressed. Later, she promised, guiding him back toward his room. First, you need to regain your strength. Then we'll talk. I give you my word. Cashin wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was already creeping back into his limbs. The short walk had taken more out of him than he'd expected. Reluctantly, he allowed Sarah to lead him back to his room. As he settled back onto the living bed, which seemed to adjust itself eagerly to welcome him back, Cashin's mind raced with questions. Why had they saved him? What was this first spark? And what role was he supposed to play in all this? One thing was certain. He needed to recover quickly. Whether these aliens were friends or had more sinister motives, he needed to be strong enough to face whatever came next. Yet even as suspicion gnawed at him, he couldn't help feeling a strange sense of gratitude towards Sarah. She had saved his life, after all, and there was something in those violet eyes that made him want to trust her, despite everything his military training screamed about alien encounters. Confused and conflicted, Cashin drifted back to sleep, his dreams filled with explosions, screaming squad mates, and a pair of violet eyes watching over him through it all. Over the next few days, Cashin's strength returned rapidly. The Avalor's medical technology, or medical biology, as seemed more accurate, worked wonders. Wounds that would have taken weeks to heal on Earth closed in days. The nanites that Sarah had mentioned appeared to be some form of organic technology that accelerated healing while preventing infection. Each day, Sarah would bring him the silvery nutrient drink, occasionally supplemented with solid food that resembled earth fruits, but with strangely geometric patterns and flavors that shifted as he chewed them. She would help him exercise, gradually increasing the duration of their walks around the ship. During these explorations, Cashin learned more about the Avalor culture and their symbiotic relationship with their vessels. The ship itself was a vast, sentient organism that had been cultivated over centuries from specialized genetic material. It required care and attention, and in return, it provided everything the crew needed to survive in space. But despite the fascinating surroundings and Sarah's patient explanations, Cashin couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from him. The testing that Sentinel Tarek had mentioned hadn't been brought up again, but occasionally he would catch other crew members watching him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to what looked unervingly like hope. It was on the 5th day of his conscious recovery that Sarah finally brought him to what she called the council chamber, a large, circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the space outside the ship. In the center of the room was a circular platform surrounded by seats that seemed to have grown organically from the floor. Waiting for them were several members of the Veil, their armor shifting like liquid mercury in the starlight streaming from above. Their masks displayed various colors, mostly cool blues and greens, with occasional flashes of yellow or purple. Cashin Veil. One of them stepped forward, their masks cycling through shades of blue. I am Elder Severian of the Veil Conclave. We welcome you to full consciousness aboard the Avalor vessel Luminera. Thank you for saving my life, Cashin replied carefully, feeling suddenly underdressed in his simple Avalor-provided garments. Though I'm still not entirely clear on why you did. Directness. Another Veil commented, their mask flashing briefly orange. The humans at least possess that virtue. Perhaps it would be best if I explained, Commander Lyran stepped forward from where he had been standing near the edge of the chamber. "Please sit." One of the organic chairs extended itself toward Cassian, reshaping to better accommodate human anatomy. Sarah gave him an encouraging nod, and he sat down, finding the chair surprisingly comfortable. "What do you know of the first spark, Cassian Vale?" Commander Lyran asked. "Only that it's something you're concerned about," Cassian answered honestly. "Something you think I might be connected to somehow." Lyra nodded. "The first spark is difficult to describe in terms you would understand. It is both energy and consciousness, ancient beyond reckoning. When the universe was young, it was one of the first self-aware energies to emerge from the primordial chaos. One of the Veil, Elder Severian, gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed what appeared to be a swirling mass of energy, constantly shifting and changing, yet somehow cohesive. For millennia, the first spark slumbered in the spaces. "Between stars," Severian continued, "the Veil have been its guardians, ensuring it remained in peaceful dormancy. But recently, it has shown signs of awakening. And that's bad," Cassian ventured. "Catastrophic," another of the Veil stated flatly. "The first spark in its awakened state is chaotic, uncontrolled. It has not recognized the boundaries of organic life. The last time it stirred, 3-star systems were extinguished." Cassian felt a chill run down his spine. "And this relates to me how exactly?" Commander Lyran stepped closer to the holographic display, manipulating it to show what appeared to be wave patterns. "The explosion that nearly killed you? It was no ordinary weapon. A human experimental energy device detonated in that sector, and its resonance pattern partially awakened the first spark. We contained a fragment of it," Elder Severian added, "bringing it aboard this vessel for safekeeping while we determined how to return it to dormancy. But something unexpected happened." Sarah moved to stand beside Cassian's chair. "Your brainwave patterns," she said softly. "They resonate at precisely the frequency needed to communicate with the first spark. It's why I found you still alive when everyone else had perished. The spark recognized something in you." Cassian blinked, trying to process this. "So you're saying I'm somehow tuned to this ancient energy being's frequency? Like a radio?" "A crude but not inaccurate analogy," Commander Lyran confirmed. "Which makes you potentially valuable in our efforts to calm the first spark and return it to dormancy." "And by valuable, you mean you want to use me as some kind of key?" Cassian asked, the uneasiness he'd been feeling intensifying. "Not use," Sarah corrected quickly. "Ask for your help. There's a difference." One of the Veil stepped forward, their masks cycling to a deep purple. "Time grows short. The fragment we contain is calling to the rest of the first spark. If we cannot return it to dormancy soon, it will fully awaken and call its complete self here. This vessel, this system, perhaps this entire sector would be at risk." "So no pressure," Cassian muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What exactly would I have to do?" "We would take you to the Chamber of Containment," Commander Lyran explained. "There, you would attempt to establish a connection with the first spark fragment and convince it to return to sleep." "And if I refuse?" Cassian asked, though he already suspected the answer. "That is your right," Elder Severian said, which surprised Cassian. "We do not force assistance. But without your help, our options are limited and far more dangerous for everyone." Sarah touched Cassian's shoulder gently. "I understand this is a lot to process. You don't have to decide immediately." Cassian looked up at her, searching those strange violet eyes for any sign of deception. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," Commander Lyran agreed. "But please understand, time is a luxury we may not have in abundance." As the meeting concluded, Cassian felt the weight of their expectations settle on his shoulders. He was being asked to mentally connect with an ancient cosmic entity that had the power to destroy star systems. The rational part of him wanted to run as far and as fast as possible. But where would he go? He was on an alien ship light years from Earth, and his entire squad was dead. And then there was Sarah, who had saved him, cared for him, and now looked at him with those eyes that somehow made him want to be worthy of her faith in him. As they left the council chamber, a small creature that resembled a cross between a cat and a slug approached them, moving with surprising grace along the corridor wall. It chirped inquisitively at Sarah. "What is that?" Cashin asked, momentarily distracted from his existential crisis. "A council cat slug," Sarah replied, reaching out to stroke its iridescent fur. "They help with voting decisions. They can sense emotional currents and ethical dilemmas." The creature chirped again, then leaped gracefully from the wall to Cashin's shoulder, where it settled, purring against his neck. "It seems to like you," Sarah observed with a small smile. "At least someone on this ship does," Cashin muttered, though he found himself gently scratching behind what he assumed were the creature's ears. It purred louder in response. They continued walking, the cat slug still perched on Cashin's shoulder, until they reached an area of the ship he hadn't seen before. A sort of garden where plants of all descriptions grew from the walls, floor, and ceiling. Some emitted gentle light, others subtle fragrances. It was peaceful in a way that reminded Cashin of the botanical gardens his mother had taken him to as a child. Sarah led him to a spot where the floor formed a natural bench, gesturing for him to sit. "This is my favorite place on the ship," she said, settling beside him. "The Luminera knows it calms me, so she always grows the most soothing varieties here." The cat slug hopped down from Cashin's shoulder, scampering off to investigate a cluster of luminous flowers. "So," Cashin began after a moment of silence, "you really think I can help with this first spark thing? I'm not exactly a diplomat. Sarah, I'm a soldier. I break things for a living." "Sometimes broken things understand each other," Sarah replied softly. "The first spark is damaged in its way, confused, angry, not unlike many soldiers I've treated." Cashin wanted to be offended by the comparison, but found he couldn't muster the energy. She wasn't wrong. He'd seen enough combat to know the toll it took, not just physically but mentally. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the constant undercurrent of rage that so many veterans carried home with them. "Even if I wanted to help," he said instead, "how am I supposed to communicate with something that's basically a sentient ball of cosmic energy? I don't exactly speak ancient entity." "Not with words," Sarah explained. "With emotion, intention. The first spark doesn't understand language as we know it. It perceives emotional states, patterns of thought." "Great," Cashin sighed. "So I just have to project calm, peaceful thoughts at the ancient Starkiller." "No problem." Sarah's hand found his in the dim light of the garden. Her skin was cooler than human standard, but not unpleasantly so. "You won't be alone, Cashin. I'll be there with you." The simple touch and the sincerity in her voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. For a moment, all the strangeness of his situation, being rescued by aliens, learning about cosmic entities, sitting in a living garden on a sentient ship, faded into the background. All that mattered was the connection between them, human and Avalor, yet somehow bridging that gap. "Why do you care so much?" he asked quietly. "I'm just one human soldier. Not even a particularly important one." Sarah looked at him for a long moment before answering. The Avalor believe that all life is connected, that healing one being contributes to healing the universe itself. She paused. "But if you want a less philosophical answer, I think you're brave and kind underneath that soldier's exterior. And I believe you can help us, help everyone, if you choose to." Before Cashin could respond, an alarm sounded. Not harsh like military alerts he was accustomed to, but a series of melodic tones that nonetheless conveyed urgency. Sarah stood quickly. "Something's happening with the first spark fragment. We need to go." Heart pounding, Cashin followed her out of the garden, trying to ignore the voice in his head that whispered he was rushing into something he couldn't possibly understand. But another voice, quieter yet somehow stronger, told him that this might be his chance to do something truly meaningful, to save lives rather than take them. As they hurried through the ship's corridors, Cashin made his decision. He would try to help, not for the veil, not for some cosmic balance, but for Sarah and the faith she had placed in him. He just hoped he wouldn't let her down. The alarm tones led them to a gathering of both Avalor and Vale crew members outside a heavily secured area of the ship. The very walls here seemed different, older, somehow, with patterns that felt more deliberately designed rather than organically grown. Elder Severian and Commander Lyran stood conferring with another Vale whose armor appeared more elaborate than the others. When they noticed Sarah and Cashin approaching, they broke off their conversation. "The fragment is becoming unstable," Commander Lyran explained without preamble. "Its resonance patterns are amplifying. We believe it's trying to call to its greater self. We must act now," the elaborately armored Vale stated, their masks cycling through shades of red and amber. "The human must attempt the connection." "He's not fully recovered," Sarah protested. "We should—" "There's no time," Elder Severian cut in, their tone gentle but firm. "If the first spark fully awakens, none of us will survive to regret our haste." All eyes turned to Cashin. He swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll do it, but I need to know exactly what I'm getting into." "The chamber of containment lies behind these doors," Commander Lyran explained, gesturing to a massive set of doors that appeared to be made of some crystalline material rather than the ship's usual organic components. "Inside is the fragment of the first spark, contained within a specialized field. You will enter and attempt to establish mental contact." "What happens if I can't connect with it?" Cashin asked. "Then we try something else," Sarah answered firmly, giving the Vale a look that suggested she wouldn't accept any other answer. "And if I do connect, but can't calm it down?" Cashin pressed. The Vale and Avalor exchanged glances. "Let us cross that bridge if we come to it," Elder Severian finally said. Not exactly reassuring, Cashin thought, but he'd made his decision. "I'll need Sarah with me," he stated, making it clear this wasn't a request. Again, the aliens exchanged looks, seeming to communicate something without words. Finally, the elaborate armored Vale inclined their head. "Very well. Medical officer Sarah may accompany you to monitor your vital signs, but she must remain at a safe distance from the containment field." Sarah squeezed Cashin's hand briefly. "I'll be right there with you." With a series of gestures, Elder Severian activated a mechanism that caused the crystalline doors to part, revealing a long corridor beyond. The walls here were covered in what appeared to be ancient inscriptions, symbols that seemed to shift and change even as Cashin looked at them. As their group proceeded down the corridor, Cashin felt a strange sensation building in his chest. A resonance, almost like the feeling of a powerful bass note at a concert, but coming from within rather than without. "You feel it, don't you?" Sarah asked quietly. "The resonance." Cashin nodded. "Is that normal?" "It confirms what we suspected," Commander Lyran said from behind them. "Your neural patterns are harmonizing with the first spark, even at this distance." The corridor opened into a vast, circular chamber. Unlike the rest of the ship, this space had a cold, austere quality. The walls were covered in the same shifting inscriptions, but here they glowed with an inner light. The floor featured concentric circles of what appeared to be metal or stone, leading to a central platform. And on that platform, suspended in a shimmering field of energy, was the first spark fragment. It was both more and less than Cashin had expected. Not the dramatic, swirling mass from the holographic display, but a small, dense point of light that somehow seemed to contain depths beyond its visible size. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched the strange resonance in his chest, shifting in color from brilliant white to deep violet and back again. "Beautiful," he murmured despite himself. "And dangerous," Elder Severian reminded him. Beauty and danger often walk hand in hand in this universe. The Vale took positions around the outer circle of the chamber, while Commander Lyran operated what appeared to be controls integrated into the floor design. Sarah stayed close to Cashin. "What do I do?" Cashin asked, his eyes still fixed on the pulsing light. "Approach the inner circle," Commander Lyran instructed. "Then extend your consciousness toward the first spark. Do not try to force a connection. Allow it to recognize you." "And then," Sarah said softly, "we try to understand what it wants, what disturbed its sleep. And you try to convince it that returning to dormancy is the best course." Cashin took a deep breath. "Right. Have a chat with the cosmic entity." Easy. He stepped forward, crossing the first of the concentric circles on the floor. Immediately, he felt the resonance in his chest intensify. Another step, another circle, and the feeling grew stronger. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming, like standing too close to massive speakers playing a frequency that vibrated through his entire being. Your vital signs are elevated but stable, he heard Sarah call from behind him. You're doing well, Cashin. 3 circles in, and his vision began to blur at the edges. The shifting inscriptions on the walls seemed to be moving faster now, almost frantically. For circles, and he could hear, or perhaps feel, a sound like distant thunder. The 5th and final circle lay before him, separating him from the platform where the first spark pulsed and flickered. Cashin hesitated for just a moment, then stepped across. The resonance exploded into something else entirely. It was as if every cell in his body suddenly became aware of itself, vibrating in harmony with the ancient energy before him. The chamber, the veil, even Sarah, all faded from his awareness. There was only him and the first spark. And then, memories crashed through him like a tidal wave. Not his own memories, but something older, vaster. The birth of stars. The cold emptiness between galaxies. The slow dance of cosmic bodies through eons of time. Awareness without form. Existence without limitation. Beneath these alien impressions, his own memories began to surface. The battlefield. The explosion. His squad mates screaming as light engulfed them. Earlier missions, victories and losses, faces of those he'd saved and those he couldn't. Back further, enlisting, training, his childhood home with its small garden where his mother grew tomatoes in the summer. All of it jumbled together, human and cosmic, specific and infinite. For a terrifying moment, Cashin felt as if he might lose himself entirely in this flood of consciousness. Focus, he heard Sarah's voice, distant but clear. Remember who you are. Cashin seized onto that. His name, his identity. He was Cashin Vale, human, soldier, and now, somehow, a bridge to an ancient entity that could destroy worlds. With tremendous effort, he mentally reached toward the first spark, not with words but with intention. Asterisk, I see you. I feel you. What do you want? Asterisk. The response wasn't verbal, but he understood it nonetheless. Confusion. Pain. A sense of violation. The experimental weapon that had detonated on the battlefield had somehow wounded the first spark, torn away a fragment of its being. The fragment wanted to return to the whole, to heal. But there was something else there too, a wild, chaotic energy that threatened to lash out indiscriminately. Fear, perhaps, or anger. If this fragment called to its greater self in this state, the resulting reunion could release devastating energy. I understand pain, Cashin projected, thinking of his own wounds, both physical and emotional. And violation. The image of his squad, obliterated in an instant, flashed through his mind. But destroying everything won't heal those wounds. He felt resistance, skepticism. What could a brief, limited consciousness like his know of cosmic pain? Instead of arguing, Cashin opened himself further, sharing the depth of human suffering he'd witnessed and experienced. War, loss, grief, but also healing, recovery, the slow, painful process of putting oneself back together after devastation. This is what we do, he conveyed. Asterisk, we break, and then we heal. Sometimes we're different afterward. Sometimes the breaking changes us forever. But we find a way to continue. Asterisk. He thought of Sarah, of her gentle hands tending his wounds, of the Avalor's ship, growing and adapting to support its inhabitants, of Earth with all its flaws and beauty. Rest now, he urged. Asterisk, heal and sleep. There will be time for reunion later, when the pain has subsided. Asterisk. For a long, breathless moment, nothing changed. The first spark continued to pulse erratically, its light fluctuating wildly. Then, gradually, the pulses began to slow. The light steadied, settling into a gentle, regular rhythm. As the first spark calmed, Cashin felt the overwhelming resonance in his body begin to subside. His vision cleared enough to see the containment field around the entity strengthen, the energy patterns stabilizing. He had done it. The first spark was returning to dormancy. Relief washed through him, followed immediately by bone-deep exhaustion. His knees buckled, and he would have collapsed to the floor if strong hands hadn't caught him from behind. "I've got you," Sarah's voice came, close to his ear. "You did it, Cashin. You actually did it." The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was the first spark, now glowing with a steady, peaceful light. Then darkness claimed him once more. Cashin awoke to find himself back in his recovery room, the living bed adjusted to cradle him perfectly. His body ached, but not with the sharp pain of injury, more like the deep soreness that follows intense physical exertion. Sarah sat beside him, just as she had when he'd first regained consciousness days ago. When she noticed his eyes open, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart skip. "Welcome back," she said, reaching for his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I ran a marathon through my own brain," Cashin groaned, but he managed a weak smile in return. "The first spark, stable," Sarah assured him. "Whatever you did in there worked. It's returned to a dormant state, and the connection to its greater self has been temporarily severed. The Veil have already begun preparations to return it safely to deep space." "Good," Cashin sighed, relaxing back into the bed. Then a thought struck him. "How long was I out this time?" "Only about 14 hours, Sarah said. "Much better than your previous record." Cashin chuckled, then winced as the movement sent a dull throb through his skull. "Ow!" Mental communication with ancient entities gives you one hell of a headache, as it turns out. Sarah reached for a small vial on the bedside table, the same opalescent liquid she'd given him that first day. This should help. He accepted it without hesitation this time, downing the contents in one swallow. The cooling effect spread through him immediately, dulling the pain. "The Veil want to speak with you once you're feeling up to it," Sarah informed him, setting the empty vial aside. "They're impressed. No one expected you to succeed so completely on your first attempt." "Honestly, neither did I," Cashin admitted. "It was intense. I saw, felt, things I can't even begin to describe." Sarah nodded. "The first spark exists on a level of reality most consciousnesses can't perceive without going mad. The fact that you not only maintained your sanity, but actually managed to communicate effectively is remarkable. Maybe I wasn't entirely sane to begin with," Cashin joked, but there was an undercurrent of seriousness to his words. After everything he'd seen in the war, perhaps his mind was already accustomed to processing horrors beyond normal comprehension. Sarah seemed to understand the unspoken thought. "Sometimes, what others see as damage creates unique strengths," she said softly. "Your experiences, painful as they were, may have prepared you for this in ways none of us could have anticipated." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Sarah's hand still resting lightly on his. Then a thought occurred to Cashin. "So what happens now?" he asked. "The first spark is contained, crisis averted. Do you drop me off at the nearest human outpost and go on your way?" Something flickered across Sarah's face. Disappointment? Concern? "Is that what you want?" Cashin considered the question seriously. A week ago, his answer would have been an immediate yes. Get back to his unit, back to the war, back to the only life he'd known for years. But now, "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Everything feels different. I'm different." Before Sarah could respond, a soft chime sounded, and the doorway rippled as Commander Lyran entered, followed by Elder Severian. Both stopped respectfully at the threshold. "Forgive the intrusion," Commander Lyran said. "We wish to express our gratitude in person." Elder Severian's mask glowed a warm gold. Approval, Cashin had learned. What you accomplished in the Chamber of Containment was unprecedented, Cashin Veil. No individual has ever established such clear communication with the first spark. "Just got lucky, I guess," Cashin shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Not luck," Elder Severian countered. "Something within you, your particular constellation of experiences, perhaps created a bridge that neither Avalor nor Vale have managed in millennia of study. Commander Lyran stepped forward. The Conclave has voted. You are to be offered the status of honored guest among both our peoples for as long as you wish it. Cassian blinked in surprise. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Sarah suggested, squeezing his hand lightly. At least until you decide what you want to do next. Looking at her, at this alien woman who had saved his life, who had believed in him when he wasn't sure he believed in himself. Cassian found his decision wasn't so difficult after all. Yes, he said. I accept. Thank you. After Commander Lyran and Elder Severian departed, promising a formal recognition ceremony once Cassian had fully recovered, Sarah helped him out of bed. He was steadier on his feet this time, the lingering effects of his connection with the first spark already fading. There's something I want to show you, she said, leading him through the ship's corridors. They passed other crew members along the way, both Avalor and Vale, who acknowledged Cassian with nods or gestures of respect. Word of his accomplishment had clearly spread throughout the ship. Eventually, they arrived at a section of the vessel he hadn't seen before, an external observation platform that jutted from the main body of the ship like a transparent blister. The view was breathtaking. Stars stretched in every direction, and in the distance, a nebula painted swirls of purple and blue across the void. I come here to think, Sarah said, guiding him to a spot where the floor formed a comfortable seating area. The Luminera knows I find it peaceful. They sat side by side, gazing out at the stars. After a comfortable silence, Sarah spoke again. You know, there's a position available on the medical staff for someone with unique insights into human physiology and psychology. Cassian turned to look at her, raising an eyebrow. Are you offering me a job, Dr. Sarah? She smiled at the formal title. I'm suggesting a possibility. The alliance between humans, Avalor, and the Vale is fragile. Having someone who understands both sides could be valuable. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat, Cassian reminded her. And yet you successfully negotiated with an ancient cosmic entity, Sarah countered. That suggests diplomatic skills you perhaps didn't realize you possessed. Cassian laughed softly. When you put it that way. He turned his gaze back to the stars, contemplating. Earth was out there somewhere, his home, his past. But right here, on this living ship with its alien crew, he'd found something unexpected. Purpose, connection, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to heal wounds deeper than physical injuries. I'll think about it, he promised. Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied with that answer. Her hand found his again, cool fingers intertwining with warm ones. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I hope you stay. At least for a while. As they sat together, watching the stars drift by, Cassian felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The resonance of the first spark still echoed faintly within him, a reminder of the vast, incomprehensible universe beyond human understanding. But here in this moment, with Sarah's hand in his, the universe didn't seem quite so cold or empty. I think I will, he finally said. Stay, that is, for a while. Sarah's smile was like starlight. Good. The Luminera would miss you if you left. She's grown quite fond of your strange human feet. Cassian laughed, a genuine, full-bodied laugh that chased away the last shadows of pain. Well, we can't disappoint the ship, can we? Definitely not, Sarah agreed solemnly, though her eyes danced with humor. She might pout, and trust me, you don't want to see a bioship pout. The ventilation systems get very dramatic. As they shared another laugh, Cassian realized something. For the first time since he could remember, he wasn't thinking about the war, about his next mission, about survival. Instead, he was simply present in this moment, with this remarkable alien woman on this impossible living ship. And he was happy. The human soldier had opened his eyes to find an alien woman waiting at his bedside. And somehow, against all odds, that had been exactly what he needed. In the vast darkness of space, aboard a ship that lived and breathed, two beings from different worlds had found connection. It wasn't a conclusion, Cassian knew, but a beginning. Whatever came next, diplomatic missions, further encounters with cosmic entities, or simply learning to navigate the peculiar jurisdictional disputes between maintenance drones and neural vines. They would face it together. And that, he decided as he gazed at the stars with Sarah by his side, was worth staying for. 3 months later, Cashin stood on the external observation deck, watching as a small shuttle departed from the Luminera. Aboard it was a containment vessel holding the first spark fragment, now permanently dormant, being transported by Veil specialists to a secure location in deep space. "Good riddance?" Sarah asked, joining him at the viewport. "Not exactly," Cashin replied thoughtfully. "More like goodbye to an old friend. A very strange, very powerful old friend who could have destroyed us all, but still." Sarah laughed, the sound still reminding him of wind chimes. "You humans have the oddest perspective on relationships," says the woman whose favorite pet is a voting cat slug, Cashin teased, gesturing to the iridescent creature currently draped across Sarah's shoulders like a living scarf. "Counselor Flufftentacle is a highly respected member of the ship's democratic process," Sarah replied with mock dignity, scratching the creature under what passed for its shin. It purred contentedly. In the months since the containment of the first spark, Cashin had settled into life aboard the Luminera with surprising ease. His role had evolved beyond simple human liaison into something more complex. He served as a bridge between the Avalor, the Veil, and the human colonies they occasionally contacted. His unique experience with the first spark had given him insights into cosmic energies that even the ancient Veil found valuable. And then there was Sarah. What had begun as healer and patient had blossomed into something deeper. Cross-species relationships weren't unheard of among the Avalor, though they were rare. Their differences, physiological, cultural, philosophical, created challenges, but also opportunities for growth and understanding. "The Elder Conclave approved our proposal," Sarah said, changing the subject. "We'll be diverting to the Cygnus Reach next cycle to investigate the anomalies there." "Good," Cashin nodded. The energy fluctuations in that sector had reminded him of what he'd felt from the first spark, though on a much smaller scale. It was unlikely to be dangerous, but worth investigating nonetheless. "They specifically requested your participation in the survey team," Sarah added with a small smile. "It seems you've become our resident expert on strange cosmic phenomena." "Not sure if that's a promotion or a punishment," Cashin chuckled. "But I'll take it." As they stood there, watching the stars, Cashin reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought him here. From soldier to survivor to diplomat to whatever he was now, explorer perhaps, seeker of understanding in a universe vaster and stranger than humanity had ever imagined. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Earth, I mean. Your home." Cashin considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I miss the smell of rain on hot pavement. Real coffee." He grinned at her. "Shoes." Sarah rolled her eyes, still with the foot coverings. "But do I miss the war? The constant fighting? The destruction?" He shook his head. "No, I don't miss that at all." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Besides, home isn't always where you're from. Sometimes it's where you find yourself." Sarah's expression softened. "That's surprisingly poetic coming from a human soldier." "I contain multitudes," Cashin quipped, then grew serious again. "The first spark. Show me something, Sarah, beyond all the cosmic awareness and ancient memories. It showed me that connection, real connection, transcends differences, whether it's between species, civilizations, or forms of consciousness." "And have you found that connection here?" she asked, her violet eyes searching his. In answer, Cashin leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against hers, an Avalor gesture of deep affection and trust. "I have," he said simply. The living ship hummed around them, its systems adapting to support the multitude of life forms within its embrace. Outside, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns while unknown wonders waited to be discovered. And here, at this unlikely intersection of human and alien, soldier and healer, past and future, Cashin Vale had found not just a new beginning, but a new home. Not an ending, but a doorway to possibilities as vast as the universe itself. The human soldier had opened his eyes to find an alien woman waiting at his bedside. And in doing so, he had opened his heart to a new way of seeing the universe and his place within it.